is the Big Douglas Show. Big Pooh is in the co-host chair. And our guest today is Scott Jackson. Scott, how are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good.
Pretty good. Well, Scott, we're excited to have you on. Are you still doing the post game for Washington this year? I know you did last year.
Yeah. This will be, I think, year 6 of doing it, and was actually at a practice today, so it's starting to feel more real now. You know, you do all this off-season stuff, and it's just like, okay, I got time. Then I realize a week from Thursday we've got a preseason game. It's pretty crazy.
That's right. The other reason we wanted you on is I know that you have either covered or followed the Wizards forever. So
Yes.
You started your first year covering the team was Michael's first year.
Michael's was the president. It was Leonard Hamilton's 1 year. That was the 1963 Wizards. I was at Sports Talk 980. It was my first year there, and nobody wanted to do it. And they're like, well, who will do Wizards post game? And I was like, sure, why not? It's one of the 4 pro teams in town. Actually, that was actually one of 3 pro teams in town. It was prior to the Nationals. Of the major sports. Sorry, DC United. But anyway, so they're okay, sure, you can do it. It was the worst job of the station. I mean, some nights we'd get like 2 or 3 calls. Usually, people are just hammered drunk prank calling. Then the next year, of course, Jordan comes and plays, and it's like the most interesting job because everybody wants to talk to you about what's going on. Every game sold out for the next 2 years. So it was a rough first season, although it was a good experience too. I liked Leonard, and it was good, just being around the team, even though they're a complete mess. But the next year was a lot more interesting.
So I was going to ask you, Scott, what has your journey? I mean, you started covering them right before Jordan's first of 2 years playing here. But what has your journey with the Wizards been like since then? Just watching them as a team, the organization, like what are your thoughts on them as a team?
It's weird because we've had these emotions where we thought they had figured it out, right? With the first couple of years with Gilbert and, Larry Hughes, and even Larry left. They got Caron Butler in there, and you think that was good. And obviously Antoine was there, and Antoine was really was really the calming force of all that during that time. And, you felt kind of good about where they're going. Then obviously, Gilbert's situation off the court just disintegrates. You have to get rid of him. I think everybody understood that at that point. They draft John Wall, then, it takes a few years, but then they start building it up when they get Beal in there, and it feels like you're going somewhere, but then it's just kind of like, in a different level, in a different circumstances, feels like the same thing just happened again, right? They got to the second round and they couldn't get past it, right? And then that was it. And then there was a couple first rounders, and it was just kind of a lot of sameness, and it's like they're still treading water in that same area. I've known Tommy for a long time, Tommy Shepard. He was here under Ernie, covered the team then. I really like Tommy. I hope nothing but the best for him. But there's some things he's working against here. I mean, one of which was John Wall's contract. He got rid of that. I mean, and you look at how, if you play the degrees of difference between, getting Russ in here. Russ had no value, obviously, because the Wizards had to give up a pick to get, and obviously, had to give up to get him. John had no value. So it was like 2 guys that were lower values at that point. They built Russell's value up enough, at least for the Lakers' mind, they could get some pieces, guys that aren't going to ruin their structure, guys that they can move easily if they had to. Got another draft pick out of it. So, I mean, I like what he's done. It's a setting up well, but he's still got to finish it, right? And the hardest thing for him and for this franchise has always been is, will players actually come here? Will they choose to come here? Yeah, you can trade for them, but will they actually choose to come here? And that's the thing. I just feel like, my whole lifetime watching the franchise, whether they're the Bullets or the Wizards, I think a lot of the same things have happened here, which is they're just okay with being in the playoffs, right? Making the money, getting that first round paycheck, those home games, just being good enough. Don't really stick with anybody too long. That's why I feel like the situation here with Ted Leonsis, I think he understands that. I think he's realized when he looks at that franchise history, outside of guys like Wes Unseld and, Phil Chenier to some degree, who was with the broadcast longer, obviously, as a player, that these are the guys, you don't have a lot of, unlike the Washington, Redskins players that live around here forever and that are beloved, that are part of the community, they're on the broadcasts, pre and post game and on the radio. You just don't have that with the Wizards and Bullets here, outside of Phil. Again, they had Phil forever, and Phil was doing fine. I don't know why he was forced into retirement, but he was. And then you decided to bring a bunch of people in here that were like role players at best, and I'm being generous, and on 10-day contract people that are now your media people talking about this team. It's weird, but that's a whole different topic. But my thing with the Wizards is they had a lot of Moses Malones, Bernard King types, hey, we're here for a few years, we're out, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And, the Wizards have kind of fallen into the same thing. And I get it. In the NBA, it's hard to keep people forever, right? It's hard to have a guy just stick it out with one franchise and do it. So I think, the idea that Brad wants to do that's great. And if it's the best interest of the Wizards, even better. But, that's where they've got to kind of figure that whole thing out here really this year, right? Are they going to be able to get better with Bradley? And is he going to want to be part of that? It sure seems like he wants to. He isn't asking to get out of here or anything like that. So that's great. But it's just like they've got to get out of that pattern of just like, okay, being mediocre is good enough. Being the 6, 7, 8, 9 seed in the case of these last couple of years, or you could be a 10 seed, I guess, this year too, is okay. And so hopefully they try to get out of that mix and actually, truly try to be a championship team. Everybody says it, but very few teams know how to do it or actually walk the walk.
Scott, why do you think it's so hard for them to get guys to come? You would think that DC would be like a city where young kids want to go hang out and be at, and yet it does. It's the exact opposite. You're right. Nobody's ever want to come.
Yeah, I mean, people always say, "Oh, well, Paul Pierce." Okay, that was one guy, and he stayed a year and he left. Part of it is the team hasn't been good. The organization kind of cut corners. I mean, Ray Poland, like they did some things. They had the least staffed, like advanced scouting and those kind of things. They're behind in a lot of areas. Now Ted has tried to, catch them up on that, but he's also cut some corners in some areas too. Let's not make it out to be like he's Mark Cuban here or something, because he hasn't been. He talks a great game. I think sometimes it seems like his heart's in the right place, but the actions don't always back it up. I'll tell you what hurt. I mean, the year where they went into free agency after coming off a really good season with Scott Brooks, and they were coming in with Scott Brooks, and they got nothing. Obviously, they didn't even get a call back from Kevin Durant. I don't even know, if they even reached out to him or whatever happened. I mean, what didn't help there was when John Wall was like, he was too cool for it, right? Like, no, I'm not going to call people. I'm not going to recruit for my team. That's a big problem. Like, you got to have guys that have pride in being here and be a part of the organization. Nowadays, it's not just enough for the GM and the owner to reach out. Like, the players have to, be the ones doing this. We just heard the story about LeBron James basically recruited, Russell Westbrook to the Lakers. Like he was the one who sold him on the idea, which then sold the Lakers on the idea because the player wanted to be a part of it. So, this is how the things work. And if you're not going to be one of those guys that wants to do that for your franchise, you're probably going to be on a crappy team or you're going to have to go join somebody. And and I don't think John did them any favors with that. I don't know if it was a jealousy thing on his part. He knew that KD would be bigger than him, which he would have been, or what it was. I mean, no matter what him and Brad say, there was always some weird thing with them too. There was always like that little well, I was here first, well, I was, but you got the max contract. Well, I had the max, that kind of crap. And it showed, like they said all the right things when they left each other last year, but they were in the same town together all off season and never worked out together. So figure that one out. Right. So, that's part of it too. I think, the players themselves have got to be they have to be more invested in the team, the organization and the structure. They've got to kind of create that and ask them to do that. I think Tommy is aware of that. I think Tommy knows what he's got to do. And I think Wes, obviously, look, Wes Unseld Jr., I think it was a home run hire. I just hope they give him the resources and the time to do it, do it the right way.
Scott, people often, let me rephrase this. Yeah. People on the internet
yes.
often come down hard on Tommy just because he was, he's been with the Wizards for 15 plus years and he was under Ernie Grunfeld, who was making all of them horrible decisions. What can you say to people? You've known Tommy, obviously you was here when Ernie was here, but what can you tell people the difference between, if they can't see it, like I can see the difference, but the difference between Ernie Grunfeld versus a Tommy Shepard? And even though Tommy was under Ernie, he is his own man.
Well, right. You work under people and you've probably been whatever walk of life you're in. It's one thing to work under somebody. It's one thing to be the boss. Like you have different opinions, different ideas, and it helps shape it. Tommy came from a completely different background. He was in PR with the Nuggets. He wasn't even, and Tommy's not like some former basketball player. Tommy's a football guy and got into the world of the NBA and in the world of PR and has kind of built his own way. And I'll say this, and I take a lot of crap for this. I'll defend Ernie to some degree. They were complete crap when he got here. Like it was a mess. It was like dire straits, and he did lift the organization. Now his second go around of trying to lift the organization was not good, right? But there are a few things. The Wall injury certainly didn't play well for him, and That definitely set him back. But I think Ernie, like if you look at some of the trades he made over the years, some of them were amazing. I mean, to get Kwame Brown out of here for any kind of value, and some of the other ones, I mean, we're pretty good. But yeah, I mean, the latter part, the lack of drafting, the selling off picks. But I will say this: the selling off picks, that's not something a GM just thinks of. Like somebody's like, we need money, and that's not the GM. Okay, that's not the president. That's the guy who writes the check. So I mean, keep that in mind too. So you got a little bit of that, and that's why I always say with Tommy, I'm cautious because he's working with the same ownership structure that Ernie was working with. Now I hope that ownership structure is understood where they screwed up with Ernie and how they have to allow Tommy to do it. So. And I just look, he's doing some things a little bit differently. I think he's been ultra aggressive here in the last couple off seasons. He's not sitting around just waiting for something to happen. He's made something happen, getting John out of here, moving on from Russ, even though, they said all the right things about Russ. And I don't doubt that they believe that, but I think you realize there's a cap to what you can do with him, right? There's only so far you can go with him and Brad, and you have to try to do something different. But like I said, the next 2 to 3 steps are the ones that are going to be make or break for Tommy and what his tenure is going to be like here. And you could bring in, Masai Ujiri and the Messiah. And again, it's not going to matter unless you get players that want to come here eventually. It's not going to be all just, you're not going to draft a straight, right? You're not going to draft a 12-man roster of just, these draft picks are amazing. Like, I think sometimes the fan base gets all loaded up in that. People miss all the time in the draft. I mean, it happens. Even the Spurs, believe it or not, miss in the draft. Spurs have been pretty crappy, mediocre since Tim Duncan retired and Kawhi Leonard rolled out of town. They've been pretty, he can coach them up, but they're not winning anything. I mean, it's hard. You have to have the players. And again, until this becomes one of those places, and it'd be great if you could find your Giannis in a draft or, one of those guys, but they, to this point have not been able to do that.
Speaking of Tommy, it really is amazing. And in 2 years, he's been able to trade off what was considered 2 of the most untradeable contracts. Right. We got some players. I mean, I'm not saying any of those 3 are going to be all-stars, but I like Kuzma a little bit and think he could play. Yeah, the problem is that Kuzma's kind of like we've got 3 of those guys already on the roster, right? I mean, these stretch 4s that I guess can play 3.
Well, it sure feels like Davis Bertans is not part of the plan, right? I mean, they bring in a lot of stretch 4s behind him, right? And it sure feels like they're opening the door to, if somebody wants to take Davis Bertans in that contract, they'll be happy to take him, right? Like they'll be happy to move him, I should say. It sure seems like that's the way they've been moving it. But, I mean, at the same time, it's all interchangeable now in the NBA. I mean, you could have multiple stretch 4s on the floor as long as somebody can handle the ball. You got 1 or 2 ball handlers out there. You guys can space and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there is some sameness. I know what you're saying to it now outside of point guard, which is deficient at this point. But they still have time to obviously work all that out.
What did you think about the draft pick, Kispert?
Kispert. Yeah, Kispert. Yeah, I liked watching him in the tournament. I liked that Gonzaga team. I thought they were going to win it all, and then obviously the semifinal game sucked the life out of them. They had no legs, and give Baylor a lot of credit. But yeah, I thought it was a good pick. I mean, I kind of wanted them to do what they did, which was get a second pick, and that was great. I actually wanted them to take Bones Highland out of ECU with their second pick because I saw him play in college the last 2 years, and they need a scoring guard, and he's got, like freaking unlimited range. I mean, it's stupid. But I think the Todd pick's fine. I mean, I guess I don't know. I mean, I didn't watch the G League, so I'm not here to tell you I actually have any idea if he could play. But the type of player and all the stuff you read about him seems fine. It wasn't like out of whack with what they were doing. It wasn't like just some reach crazy pick or anything like that. So we'll see. And again, the other part, the thing that's killed the Wizards in the past is development. Like do you develop your players? Like, do you get guys in here do they make themselves better? Do they get better? They've had some guys that have, but they've had a lot of them that haven't. I mean, Beal did, but Beal's also probably one of those guys you could have put him anywhere and he was going to, work his way into being better. Wall did to some degree. His jump shot was still broken when he left here. It's still broken in Houston. So at some point you got to point at the players and that kind of stuff. So that's the other thing. Can they develop these guys? Are they going to give them the time? There's a huge offseason for Rui. I mean, he's looked good in the Olympics. That's great. Can he come here and do that in the NBA this year? That remains to be seen. Yeah,
I like the Kispert pick. I was a big Moses Moody fan, but he went to Golden State to pick
He was
before.
on their list, I heard.
Yeah, so I like the pick. They desperately need shooting. One of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league last year.
Guy's mature. He's been around. You know,
Yeah,
like that's the whole thing. Like a lot of times, and this happens here all the time. And this city has ruined a lot of immature players. I mean, because there's a lot of stuff going. Of course, there's a lot less going on right now because everybody's shutting down early. But you know what I'm saying. But that's been another problem. I mean, the time I covered the team, I mean, there's guys like that literally, people talk about what they did on the court, but I could tell you more stories about them off the court is why they're not here. Like just getting caught into the lifestyle, the league, and the city and all that just grabs them. And it's a shame because they had talent. I mean, they were talented. And that's why, again, I go back to the whole, like, you got to have like an adult, structure, and a really good leadership, in which they do with Bradley. Here's a guy who's, family guy, he's married, he's got kids, he's not here just to, cash checks, but they've had a lot of guys who have been here just to cash checks over the years. And that has not helped the environment.
Scott, I wonder, how do you feel? I was a big, I believe last year that for multiple reasons, but Tommy and Scott weren't necessarily on the same page with the type of players Tommy was bringing in and how Scott Brooks decided to use said players, which normally wasn't to their strength. Do you believe that one of the reasons why Tommy went after a highly coveted assistant was so him and the assistant can actually get on the same page with the type of players they're bringing in, the type of team they're trying to create, so you can get a Denny in his natural position as a secondary ball handler, as opposed to standing on the perimeter for three-point shots or something of that magnitude?
Well, I mean, I also think the bigger picture with Scott, he was here for 5 years. He was paid handsomely, and he wasn't a difference maker outside of year one and maybe part of year two. When Wall was out, he was actually really good. I mean, that was a good team with Satoransky and that group playing, when the everybody eats era. But then when Wall came back, the chemistry wasn't the same. But I think the bigger thing was the time it had run its course, right? And as an organization, and as somebody, as an organization and as an ownership group that owns two teams in town, okay, if you were going to tell me you're going to run Scott, you're going to keep Scott Brooks after 5 years of no anythings, no banners for anything, right? And you ran out your Stanley Cup championship head coach when his contract was up. I mean, I'd have a real problem with the optics of that. And I know there are different circumstances, blah, blah, blah. BS. The optics of that for a basic sports fan in town would be terrible. They'd be like, are you freaking kidding me? You're going to re-up this guy and you let Barry Trotz walk? I mean, you got to be out of your mind. So just from that standpoint, I thought there was no way in hell they could let Scott Brooks come back. Now, was I sweating a little bit for a few weeks? There was no announcement. Yeah, you damn right I was. I mean, him and Tommy share the same agent. Tommy, by the way, was on the recruiting trip. Don't forget when they went to California to get Scott with Ernie and that crew. So let's not act like, it's not my guy. I mean, it's some guy, I think there's a good relationship there. I think they like him. I think they may have offered him a contract that he just didn't think was worth coming back for too. I mean, it might've been a lower level, but anyhow, he didn't come back, and I think West Jr., it makes sense, right? You go from the high profile guy, and we can talk about his profile, whether he really was the most high profile guy at the time or was the right guy, what have you. But I think that's kind of how it works in the league. You go from one guy, all right, this bed's too hard, this one's too soft, try to find the one in between or whatever. And I think that's what they're doing here. Like, okay, so this guy was the experienced guy that was supposed to, be the ultimate respect guy. But now let's do this. Here's a guy's a grinder. I mean, West Jr. was not put on the bench till Eddie Jordan was the coach. And he had been here many years before that, working in the video room, doing his scouting. And he did everything here before he ever really got a chance to be a quote unquote coach on the staff. So I just think it made sense. And, Tommy was here too, so he knew what West Jr. was about. They talked to a million people like they always do. I mean, they love to interview people. My God. I mean, you think about how long it took to hire Tommy. I mean, same thing with this situation. Obviously, the teams are in the playoffs, so I get it. You got to take your time with some of that. But, man, they really like to interview people. And I was glad it came down to him. But, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some of that. But there's always going to be disagreement between coach and GM. There's always going to be disagreement between coach and GM about how players get used. And at the end of the day, the coaches are trying to win the game. I mean, they really are. And I know people go, oh, you got to think big picture. But nobody gives the coach a break when you go, oh, your team's like, 12 and like 30, right? Like they look at the coach. They don't say the player's winning percentage is 33%. They always say coach so-and-so's 33% winning percentage. Like you don't see it like the back, like on Basketball Reference, they don't say, Bradley Beal, you had 28 points, whatever, 400 winning percentage. They don't say that. They're like, they just show the points and the stats. They don't talk about the wins and losses. It's with all these guys. So it's the coach ultimately is going to try to win. So, I went through this over the years. When I covered the team, Doug Collins, they would talk about a plan at the beginning of the year, how we're going to do this, do that. But then they get in the game and they're trying to win the game. So, they're going to go after it. Same thing with Eddie. Same thing with Randy Whitman. You saw it here with Scott as well. I'm sure they had one plan one way, and then the other nights they would get into other things. But yeah, I mean, he did some head scratching things, but also, the bigger thing I had with him was like, it didn't seem like there was an accountability level. Like we talk about how sucky the defense is every night. We just kind of throw our hands up in the air and then rinse, repeat. And the same thing would happen the next night. Right. And then this year they got so caught up and twisted into, the COVID is just ruining us. We're the only team that's dealing with this. And granted, they had it really bad, but it was like, stop making all the excuses and just, you got to try to play through try to make a season out of it. And they ended up doing that well, but for a while there, it was just the wallowing was like, it was mind blowing, it's just like, that's a pattern that I've just seen for like 3 to 4 decades with this group.
Absolutely.
Well, let's switch gears here and talk about the other team that's getting started up. They've got more players on the COVID list, and I'm not one to tell people what to do, but it seems like it is becoming an issue, if not a problem. If we were actually in the season, I mean, we'd have premier players not playing football games. And I'm not sure what they're going to do about it. Coaches said over and over without saying, go get the shot, all the reasons why you should get the shot, including the fact that he's not fully healthy, immunization wise.
Well,
so,
I mean, I don't.
Do
yeah, I don't think there's much they can do. I mean, the NFL has put as much peer pressure regulations in place, right, for all these teams to like, okay, you want to lose money, you want to cost your friend some money, then don't get the shot, right? That's basically how you got to look at it. I mean, they've just made it very difficult. Now, some guys have gotten on board. I think it was Gandy Golden today said, yeah, I got it because, I just felt like it was just too much of a risk getting later in the year. And he was also watching the news about the Delta variant and all this other stuff that's going on. And then, the paycheck part of it, I'm sure kicks in. I saw Ryan Tannehill said the same thing last week. He's like, once I saw the restrictions for non-vaccinated players, it's like, it's a no-brainer. I got to do this. You hope to think, I don't know everybody's background with doctors and what have you. I always got vaccines as a kid, never had any issues with them, got the COVID vaccine as soon as I could. I just think about where we were a year ago at this time, and people were just like, damn, if somebody could just give me a shot and I could go out there and live a normal life again, right? Like we're all just begging for it. And now here we are, and the shots have been available for months. And so people are like, no, I don't know. I need more information on it. And that's fine if that's really the way you think. And if you're really like, hey, my body's a temple, I get it. A lot of these guys, I mean, this is what they do for a living. However, I will say this, just check the back of some of those sports supplements you use, and I'm just, and things that you use and make sure everything that's in it's all perfect as you think it is. And then, you know how it is. I mean, you probably got a neighbor or a friend that that's like, I'm never getting a vaccine yet. He's like a chain smoker, right? Or something like that. I mean, it's like, it just doesn't compute to me like, well, I wouldn't put this in my body, but sure, man, I'm going to go knock out, a 12 pack tonight or whatever. And it's like, okay. I mean, all right, whatever. It just is weird, and then and I'm not even talking to the guys that are on PEDs around the league that are like, oh yeah, I'm not doing this, but these are guys like, I'm like, wait a minute, was this guy like pop for like performance enhancing drugs a few years ago? Now he's not going to get a vaccine. Okay, whatever. I mean, it's just kind of strange to me, but it's a world we're living in. I think every day they put out new data that says it's the people that get really sick that go to hospitals don't have the shot, and people still feel like they can just roll the dice, I guess.
Scott, besides from the COVID absences at camp so far, what has your impressions of this year's team look like to you?
Well, I mean, I've only been out, like I literally was out there today in Ashburn. I didn't go to Richmond, and they will not have pads until tomorrow. So it's really hard to say anything until they do that and play preseason games and actually compete. But I think what you've seen so far is they have a pretty deep group of receivers. It's going to be a tough cut. I mean, when I was out there today, those guys didn't drop balls. Steve Sims, who had issues dropping balls in the season, did not drop a single pass, made some really tough catches today. You saw Gandy Golden make some plays. Looks like a different guy out there. I think the 11 looks a lot better on him than 10 did. He looked good. Brown, the rookie, is as good as advertised, I think. Carter, who's a vet who's been around for a while, he made some plays. He flashed. McLaurin doesn't miss. So that's interesting. The ends were getting pressure quite often, which as you would expect them to do. I'm talking about obviously Young and Sweat. They were crashing in there quite a bit. There was some, the DBs, Landon Collins, man, that's amazing. Really, you
It's
told
incredible.
me Achilles tendon, to see him running the way he is out, that's incredible. And
he heard the talking. He's on the mission right
dude,
now. He looks
incredible out there running around. I couldn't believe that. I thought, I tell you what, Jared Patterson, the rookie from Buffalo, the undrafted rookie, he shows you some stuff that's interesting. McKissick still looks really good running in there, and obviously Antonio Gibson as well. So that I'm excited about as long as Gibson and McKissick are healthy, they'll be good. But the fact that they got a rookie that can come in and play could be helpful. Because you still always need to have depth, because we saw last year Gibson was rolling along and then that turf toe bites him in that Pittsburgh game, and then obviously changed a lot of the things they could do on offense. So that's good. I'm still, like I said, a lot of stuff you got to see him with pads on going against real, competition. But I think overall there's some things to be interested in. Heineke was dropping some dimes in there today. Fitzpatrick had his moments too. They're both similar. They can get out of their way. You didn't have a quarterback when Smith was playing last year. It was like having a wounded animal out there at times, it was a shame. He was gutting it out and he did some good things for them, but he just couldn't get out of his own way. Whereas these two guys can really move, which is helpful, I think. And I think it'll bring another dimension to the offense this year.
You said you were out there today. No Jamin Davis today, did I see?
He has an eye infection. Sounds terrible. Hey. Yeah, it's gross. I don't know if he was pink eye or what, but he's an eye infection. So he didn't play today. Who else was out today? Jonathan Allen was on the side today. Cornelius Lucas was back from the COVID list, but he did not practice with them, but he was out there at least. So I guess that means he's cleared whatever he has to clear. And obviously Ioannidis, Sheriff, Payne, and I don't know, I'm missing Chris Miller, but not the Chris Miller that works at NBC Sports. Those guys were all out, and there's somebody else I'm missing. But anyway, so those people weren't there. Yeah. But Kyle Allen's not practicing right now because he tweaked his ankle, which he got surgically repaired. So that's a little, doesn't seem like a big thing. It's third string, but you're like, well, we saw last year all three could play. All three could play at some point. All three could play at some point.
Scott, I've been big on, and Doug will tell you, I've been big on repeatedly saying to myself and others, this is year 2 of a rebuild or retool, whichever you want to use.
Right.
Yeah. And, yes, we backed into a division as division champs last year because division was just horrible. But do you feel like the team is saying, possibly doing all the right things that lets us know, like, yes, we want to win. Yes, we want to be division champs again, but we know this is a different year than last year. Like, we're starting all over again. And this is year 2 of a retool or rebuild.
Yeah. I think Ron made a big point of that. Like, it starts over. Like, none of that carries over. And this always drives me crazy about the NFL, because people just assume, because say you won 3 games at the end of the year, you just pick up with a 3-game win streak the following year. No, your roster's completely different. The other teams are trying to get better. You could have a great offseason. Like, this team had a good offseason, right? And they actually have gotten the roster better. It doesn't mean that, they are necessarily going to be like leaps and bounds better in terms of record when it's all said and done, for all we know. Dallas didn't take the offseason off. They had a really good draft. You would like to think if Prescott plays, they're probably not as horrific as they were last year, even though their defense was horrible. Philadelphia, it's hard to imagine they could be that much crappier than they were last year, but they are starting essentially with a rookie quarterback. It hurts, he played some, but he didn't play a ton. The Giants are the team that's kind of like hard to figure out, because to me, it's a lot of it has to do with Saquon Barkley. Like, if Saquon Barkley plays, okay, then their chances are a heck of a lot better. I don't really think Daniel Jones is really exciting outside of when he plays Washington. When he plays this team, he looks like a world beater against everybody else. He says, he's okay. But their defense was really tough last year. They were really well coached. They were, I think Joe Judge did a lot of good things. They kind of, I think they impressed me in that regard. But, I was thinking about this the other day. I always got all wrapped up in the division, which, is kind of the way your brain works with the NFL over the years. But now that we've expanded to 17 games, you don't want to suck in your division, but it's 6 games, right? I mean, you have more games. It's not like the old days when you had 5-team divisions and it was half your games, right? So it was 8 games as your division. So if you did terrible in your division, you're probably out of it. Now it's actually you could survive a 2-4 division record, which seems ridiculous, but you could do that now as long as you play well outside of it. So I think they're better. How much better? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, when they get at it, like a lot of it has to do with Fitzpatrick, how well he hooks onto this thing. And if he's the guy that, came off the bench in Miami and every time he started, everybody loved him, then, they could have some really good things happen for him.
Well, I was going to ask you, Scott, what makes for a good season for this team?
Well, I mean, I think you want to do better record. I mean, I don't think you want to be below 500. I mean, you could be, this is so goofy. You could be 9-8. You could be 10-7. I mean, I gotta work on the math. I start sometimes I can really stop myself before I start thinking about the numbers. But yeah, I mean, I think just being better, winning more games, right? Just offensively, there was just so many games last year where it was like, oh my God, it was come on, 3 and out, punt, you just couldn't find a rhythm until it was too late. Like the game against Carolina, I mean, literally was 3 quarters before they could get out of their own way, and then Heineke comes in and the whole lit the world on fire that last quarter. So yeah, you want to see some more consistency, from them, from start to finish, make life easier on the defense. I mean, when you get a short field, cash in and the defense gets off the field, stay on the field. Don't, just give it right back to the, other team's offense right away. So those are the kind of things you just want to see, the consistency level. I think Ron, I mean, there's so many things that are better about the team. Like you could see last year, even if the wins weren't racking up, I go to practice and I just watch the practice. This is so much better. This looks so much better than it used to look with the last 6 years with Jay and even Callahan, who did kind of ramp it up a little bit with the practices and stuff when he took over. But, I think that's still got to, it's translate into consistency and consistent winning. And we'll see. I mean, again, everybody feels good this time of year outside of Indianapolis today. Lost their starting quarterback.
Scott, you spoke about it when we first started talking about the receivers, and this is a place where a lot of people are interested. Best guess. We know 3 who's definitely on the roster: McLaurin, Samuels, and the rookie Brown. Mm-hmm. Best guess. How many do they keep, and which other receivers make the cut?
I mean, I think barring injury, I think Humphreys will make the team. He looks like him and Fitzpatrick have a real connection. You can see that, there's something there. I think Cam Sims, and then I think you're talking, what am I at right now? I'm at 5 right there, right? Is that 5?
Yep. 5.
You counted Brown, right? You counted Brown in the beginning.
Yep.
I think then you're looking at, it's like Harmon, Steve Sims, and
AGG, those guys.
Yeah, AGG. And then, I mean, Milne to me could be practice squad. I mean, if he's a slot guy anyway, he's already disadvantaged because you got Humphreys who is there and, at that position as a veteran, unless you just really loved him, in these games. So, I mean, and again, Ron went over this today because I asked him, because you watch it and you're like, well, crap, how are you going to cut to 6 is hard, right? And cutting to, but then the 7-8 territory on the scene is obnoxious. You're like, what are you going to do? Are you a run and shoot team? Why the hell are you need 7 or 8 receivers on this team? And then you start saying, well, Steve Sims Jr. better be better on punt returns or whoever is back there, or kickoff returns, whoever those guys, they have to really solidify themselves there to make the roster. And can you be a gunner? Can you run down on punts? Can you cover punts? Can you cover kickoffs? And those kind of things that aren't really, sexy and exciting, but those, and you won't see those in practice. You'll see that, like the second and third preseason games, most likely, who separates themselves there. But if they kept 6, I mean, it's basically those 3 guys you mentioned. I think Humphreys is probably the 4th guy. I would say, again, it comes down, I think Cam Sims is ahead of Steve and then the rest of that group after that. But I could see them squeezing to 7. And then I would even talk about Isaiah Wright or DeAndre Carter or those guys. But I think, they probably have a little bit more to overcome. And then who knows, what somebody gets hurt, unfortunately, it changes the trajectory for all this.
Scott, you did radio forever with Brian and Doc. Got to be a great job, but also maybe the hardest job on the planet, keeping those 2 guys in line.
Or just not trying to goof around, which we did a lot of, but it was fun. No, it was a good time. I still, I missed going to camp the last 2 years because obviously we didn't have camp down there last year, but that was the only, last week, everybody's down there burning up in Richmond. And I was like, I don't want to go down and watch guys in shells. You know, I was kind of glad that they saved the pads for Ashburn, but I did think about that. We had some great fun down there over the years with the interviews and, like, you know, the players that would come in there with just great access and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's great when you're playing with we're working with two guys that like literally won Super Bowls and were in the heyday of this organization. And Doc had on some teams that were really good that didn't win Super Bowls. I hear, you know, and they just hear the stories, and, you know, then all their old friends come by, and here's Gary Clark, here's Joe Theismann, you know, here's Ricky Urbans. These guys just kind of popping in, saying hello over the years. That was a lot of fun to do that. No doubt about it.
Scott, we thank you for your time today. We don't want to take up all of your time, but we thank you for popping up with us. Please let the people know where they can find you and what you have coming up.
At Jackson Sports, I got it coming up. I'll be on the post game a week from Thursday, ready to take your calls. Hopefully about some good stuff. Hopefully a clean preseason, you know, healthy, clean preseason. Should be good. So we'll talk to you there after all the games this year.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, we appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Have a good one.